Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. This Shabbat, we are filling our cups from many different angles, a baby naming, a bar mitzvah, and we have one of the synagogue's true friends and one of my dear friends with us today in Congressman Josh Gottheimer. I'd like to read a brief bio about Congressman Gottheimer and then share one personal thought. Josh Gottheimer represents New Jersey's 5th congressional district in the northern part of the state, which includes parts of Bergen, Passaic, and Sussex counties. In Congress, Josh serves on 2 committees, including the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, where he is the ranking member of the National Security Agency and Cyber Subcommittee, and is a member of the National Intelligence Enterprise Subcommittee. Josh also serves on the House Financial Services Committee, where he's a member of the Subcommittee on National Security, Illicit Finance, and International Financial Institutions, the Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Inclusion, and the Subcommittee on Capital Markets. Most impressive to me is Josh serves as the co-chair of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, where he promotes common sense over extremism and works across party lines on key issues, including lowering taxes, protecting our environment, making healthcare more affordable, protecting America's national security, and improving infrastructure to help the American people. Josh is also a member of the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, the Blue Dog Coalition, and the New Democratic Coalition. Josh lives here in Bergen County with his wife and his children. I will tell you on a personal level that I remember when Congressman Gottheimer first decided to run for office and he was meeting different people in the community and the clergy. And what I was captured by with Congressman Gottheimer was his warmth, affability, connectivity, and his ability to draw close to you and you to him. And I thought to myself, boy, I hope he doesn't win, because if he does, we won't have access to those attributes. I couldn't have been more wrong. In fact, I think those attributes intensified as he has risen in his office of the United States Congress. He's even more committed, more accessible, and more dialed into the needs of his constituents on a personal level and on a communal level. You have risen our entire community, and we are so proud to have you at the vanguard of what is a very important, sometimes challenging, and even scary time for our world. It is our great honor to welcome back to our bima and to our synagogue my dear friend and our congressman at our synagogue, Congressman Josh Gottheimer. My honor. Before I begin, I want to give a special shout out, and I'll give that shout out again later. These are fun. I know, they're really fun. You're actually taller than I am right now, Congressman.
I mean, this is amazing. I needed a ladder to get up here, but it was fine.
Soak that up. I want to give a shout out to someone who's very important to our synagogue who's here as well. His name is Ben Ladani. Ben is a soldier in the IDF, and early on into the Gaza war, he was part of the special Oketz unit. Oketz unit are the commandos that work with dogs, and he was shot 7 times by Hamas terrorists. He clung to life for a very long time. He was in a coma for more than 2 months. That's how I met him. I met him 24 hours after he was brought in, and his parents had just landed from South Africa. And he spoke here on this very bima about his journey. He just arrived back in the United States because he found a physician who's willing to do a cutting-edge surgery and doing it gratis for him. And we're hosting him here at our temple. And I just want to give a very special welcome home and welcome back to our dear friend Ben. Ben is going to be here for Shabbos and Kiddush, and I'm sure he'll make time to talk to all of us. We'll have him come up to open the Ark for Aleinu as well. And I want to make sure he gets a chance to meet you, because when you talk about the spirit of what our countries share together, that's the epitome of it right there, Congressman. Let me jump right into some questions, if it's okay with you.
Please.
A new deal was reached on Wednesday between Hamas and Hezbollah. I have to tell you, Congressman, I personally am hyper-skeptical of this deal for a bunch of reasons. First reason is just the notion of the deal is kind of crazy. Could you imagine me breaking into your house, stealing your most prized possessions, and then negotiating their return with you that you have to pay to get them back? That is in essence what we're doing. We don't know about the health, well-being, or psychological welfare of any of these people that are being brought back. Hamas is notorious for breaking deals and reneging on offers. We know that the last time we had a deal with them, it lasted 8 short days. October 7th, we had a ceasefire with them, and they broke on October 7th, 2023. So, number one, you serve on some select committees. Whatever is not classified and permitted to share, what can you tell us about this deal that we should know? And the two other parts of that question is there a person or a party that should be taking a victory lap after this deal has been achieved? And thirdly, assuming this goes off without a hitch over the next 7 weeks, how do we make sure that the other 65 hostages that Hamas holds actually comes across as well?
Just 3 anymore?
That's for now, that's it.
Thanks. First of all, Ben, it's a very big honor to be here with you. Thank you for all you've done for protecting the relationship and protecting the state of Israel. Thank you so much again. And again, Mazel Tov. Congratulations. Sorry, I'm not Drake. I know, I could do better. Sorry. I apologize that I'm, the talent here today. And Rabbi, you are a gift as well. And I think all of us in the community know that there's not a person in the state and beyond when I'm in Israel, when I talk about my adopted rabbi, because I have another rabbi, I'll admit it, but I have an adopted second rabbi. And you bring up Rabbi Kirshner's name, and people are in awe that you know Rabbi Kirshner and about his leadership, his wisdom, and his strength. So I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm with you in the sense that, of course, anything involving negotiating with terrorists, you have to go in with great skepticism off the bat, and with anger, right? And this is, by the way, those of us who have always questioned the relationship with Iran for the United States and were against the deal early on and have continued to be, it comes from a very similar place, that they lie, cheat, and steal and have never been honest. So it's tough to deal with people who not only are dishonest, but have murdered recklessly, blindlessly, and callously without any reservation or hesitation, and who's literally in announcing this agreement, Hamas leadership came out and said they look forward to doing it again, if you followed that, right? I mean, and celebrating the 7th, in the same breath as making this agreement, celebrating what happened on the 7th, the worst massacre since the Holocaust of Jewish people, and talking about what they look forward to doing in the future for more killing and following through on their objective, which is the elimination of the people of Israel and the Jewish people, right? That remains their objective, which is why when I've been on this bima before throughout this last year and a half or so, the objectives have remained consistent. Get the hostages home, crush the terrorists, and of course, as Jews, ensure that there's humanitarian aid for the innocent who are being used as human shields by terrorists. And those objectives have not changed. The number one objective of getting the hostages home, especially the Americans, we know there are 7, we believe 3 are alive, including a Don Alexander who lives but a few miles from here. Knowing that, we have a responsibility to do everything we can to get them home. And so this agreement, if that helps get the hostages home, I think we have to pursue it, and I support pursuing it. Nothing in the agreement says, at least to my knowledge, that if Hamas or Hezbollah or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or the Houthis who fired a missile today, if any of them take further action after this deal, that Israel can't retaliate, that America can't retaliate or act, right? So I'd rather get the hostages home, continue to ensure Israel's safety, do everything we can to stabilize the region and rebuild toward the Accords, the Abraham Accords, and get back on the right path. And just like in the North, if they don't follow through on agreements, there's nothing that's saying you can't continue to act. And I think that's how we should look at this. Doing anything we can to get them home. and that's what I believe. The second part of your question was who gets the credit? Well, what's been pretty amazing about this is how consistently you have a new administration, an incoming administration, and an outgoing administration has worked very closely together on this deal. And this is not, when President-elect Trump has been acting or putting out comments, there's no rogue activity here. And I think, that's very important, and that's been key to this getting done. That you have the outgoing administration that's helped structure this deal, and the incoming administration, who I think has played a very big role in speeding it up. And so I think if this gets done, and again, I remain optimistic but cautious, if it gets done, and we get all the hostages home, because by the way, any day in this process, something can go wrong. It starts tomorrow, but on day 2 or 3, something could go wrong and hold the whole thing up. But if it gets done, everyone should get credit. And everyone deserves credit, and who cares who gets credit? What matters is just that you get the hostages home and continue to ensure that Hamas is not in power.
So I happen to agree with you. David Ben-Gurion was notorious for saying, especially after Eichmann came and they wanted to reward the Mossad agents who brought him back to Israel, said the reward for the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself, meaning the real reward is just getting him home. Who cares who's responsible? But I do think it's worth noting that these two administrations that are like ice cream and onions have worked together to make that happen.
Really, I've been involved in a lot of the discussions, and both sides, the negotiators, have been at the table. Like they're all there together and working at the table and behind the scenes from the incoming administration, the outgoing administration. It's pretty incredible, actually, and especially as you point out, given the personalities, a little surprising.
Yes. Well, let me dovetail that into something you just talked about for a second. You have been an incredible source of hope and support during an unmitigated nightmare for the Alexander family. As you said, Idan Alexander is from Tenafly. He went to Tenafly High School. Many of our community people know the Alexanders. Their kids went to school together, and his face is appropriately plastered around Bergen County, and it will be until he comes home. He is not on the list of the first tranche of people coming through or Americans coming back home. And the idea is that he will be in the second tranche. So my first part of the question is, have you been in touch with the Alexander family? And I know you have regularly, but since this deal's been announced, and how are they holding up? And secondly, how do we make sure that that second tranche actually happens? Because until every single one comes across, both those that have breath in their lungs and don't, this ordeal will never come to a close.
No, and none of us should rest, even for a second, until all the hostages are home, especially the Americans. And I've made that point clear to the Alexanders, who I speak to, every day or twice a day right now. And listen, those of you who have met the Alexanders, they're the most incredible people. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they get up every day with such optimism and strength. They're just, it really blows me away. And my wife and I talk about this all the time I feel like I would probably be in a corner in the fetal position if someone had my child, and not knowing. There was obviously a proof of life video in the last few weeks, but there was a 6-month stretch where there was no word whatsoever from Idan Alexander, right? Imagine you don't know what's happening to your child at any moment, alive or dead, tortured or not tortured, you don't know. And so they've kept positive, and I think that positivity has really made a difference. They've never stopped fighting. And I am very optimistic we're going to get Idan Alexander home. And we'll do everything we can to make it happen. In terms of this phasing, you've got phase 1, which is certain categories, elderly, injured, women, which is this first phase, and then assuming the negotiations continue on toward the ultimate third phase, which is what does the governing structure look like in the region, what happens, there'll be a second release of IDF soldiers, and in that second phase of male IDF soldiers. So we have to do everything we can to get there, or to have other agreements along the way. So that's where we are. I'd say one point that I'm sure you find very frustrating, that I find maddening, and I think what's gotten lost in this last year and a half, these are American hostages. And I don't understand, and I've said this to the president many times, I don't understand how it's possible that we don't talk about the Americans who have been held hostage and who were the 46 who were murdered. We don't talk about this on a regular basis. This is about America, and it's about our national security and protecting our country. I always say, and I've said this to the president too, I feel like if this had happened in Norway to Americans, we would have sent in SEAL Team 6. We would have yellow ribbons on trees in our communities. We would talk about the hostages every day. There'd be Lifetime movies made about the hostages. But because they are Jews as well, I feel like they are not talked about in the same way. The same way, and Rabbi, we've talked about this, but it burns me up. This whole conflict should be framed in what it is. Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran and their other proxies, the Houthis, their number one enemy is not Israel, it's us. It's our freedom and it's our democracy. And they're pretty blatant about it, right? The Houthis, death to the USA, then death to the Jews on their flag. The foreign minister of Hezbollah, of blessed memory, said that Israel is not the ultimate objective, but the destruction of America is. Right? The Houthis are firing missiles at our ships. So why is that not part of the conversation? And it must be, as we think about this going forward and think about it, Don.
Look, I couldn't agree with you more. They refer to Israel as little Satan and America as big Satan. I think that we have a responsibility to take out the root of this cancer, which stems from Iran. And I know that we've spoken about this before, that when it came to Pittsburgh, we really had communal support from all streams of America. We did not get that after October 7th. You and I witnessed that at a diner, which was, that was about 10 days after. It was an incredibly painful moment that I wrote about, and it still causes me to shiver about people who just couldn't condemn these acts and couldn't demand the release of the hostages who lived amongst us, who were community leaders and religious inspiration. It's a moment of incredible fright that we didn't have after Pittsburgh. Let me ask one more question about Israel, and then I want to dovetail into some of that anti-Semitism that you're getting into. Let's lean really heavy and fiercely into hope, and everything goes right, and every hostage comes back, and there is peace. And in my goal, I would love to see the Emiratis, the Egyptians, and the Saudis rebuild Gaza and eradicate hate and take everything over. What should be the next goals of this administration after the hostages come home when it comes to the Middle East? What do you think the 1, 2, and 3 things should be? If you actually have sat with President Trump in his previous administration, because you're a person who focuses on objective much more than party, what would you whisper in his ear are the 3 things that needs to happen?
It's a really important question because you're coming into a moment where hopefully this phase of the conflict comes to an end, but opens up a whole nother question, right? What happens, in Gaza, right? What's the governing structure look like? Who's in charge? Are we there, the Americans? Are the Emiratis running the show with the Saudis? Like, who are the players who are, what is the PA, what's their involvement, the Palestinian Authority? What does this look like? And that is going to be a very big, challenging question to keep the region stable, to protect Israel, and protect us in the process, and our security, right? So that is a very big question. That would be number one, I think, that we have to grapple with. Then secondly, there's a lot of making up that has to be done, right? You've got a lot of friends who are part of the Accords whose people are very angry. The people on the ground are very angry at Israel, right? And because they watch Al Jazeera every day, they get a certain frame of things and a reference point of things and see certain numbers they see what they want to see. And so this is a big challenge you've got for the Saudis, for Bahrain, right? For I guess the Qataris, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, I don't know who I'm leaving out here. I know that I just talked to a friend who was just in Morocco who said this is a huge issue.
The Syrians, but they have their own issues.
Syrians have their own issues. I mean, who would have guessed what's going on in Syria? But there was a certain, when the Accords were in full go, and the Saudis, as you know, were considering joining the Accords, you had a very positive frame for security in the region, for economic development in the region, for cooperation in the region, which is, of course, what I believe the Iranians and their proxies were exactly scared of, right?
Yes.
But we got to get back there, so there's got to be a making up phase and rebuilding. And then how do we get the Accords or Accords Part 2 back on track? And that to me is very, very important. And how do you deal with Iran? And what's going to happen in Iran, which is greatly weakened, thankfully. Lebanon, Hezbollah, massive deterioration, right? And then you've got Syria. So the last few months have been, in so many ways, a massive turning point in the Middle East that no one could have guessed would have happened, and I think led to the ability to do this deal if it works out.
I think it's a really important point to mention that we lose sight of. If someone would say on October 6th that in the next 15 months, this massacre would happen for Israel, that would be ongoing, but at the same time, Hamas would basically be decimated. Hezbollah would be evaporated in a way that we never anticipated. We thought that would be a much more gruesome war than with Gaza, but we were pretty precise and surgical and masterful in that moment. Syria would fall. Iran is on the brink of toppling without these worst sanctions. People would scratch their head and say, are you kidding me? Correct. You know, I remember one person in Israel saying to me that he spent 2 months in New Zealand and a whale became beached, and it was the headline of the news for 2 weeks, a beached whale. He goes, in Israel, you go to bed and you wake up and there's no longer Assad in Syria. Like the whole system falls overnight, whereas in the rest of the world, you know, a beached whale is what covers the news all that time. I want to change gears to something that is a little closer to home, but also equally important, and I actually think has a lot of connective tissue to what goes on in Israel. Anti-Semitism has been on the rise for a while. If those of you who don't remember, before COVID, we had a march across the Brooklyn Bridge to stop anti-Semitism. That was during the first Trump administration. Since this time, anti-Semitism has taken off worse than the wildfires in California. Could you talk for a moment about some of the legislation that you've introduced on the floor of Congress to address this, and what you hope to introduce in this next session of Congress?
Okay, so I'm going to say something that's you might find a little too candid, Rabbi, but I think it's incredibly important, especially being in a room full of our community where I'm sure, like many people, we feel solace in a way that we didn't 2 years ago. It's a different feeling of importance of community, and I feel this all the time, especially, you know, you have to understand, you know, I get regular death threats from people who focus on my Judaism and my work with the U.S.-Israel relationship, and it's unfortunately so regular that, you know, I barely pay attention to it. You know, I have people who, when I walk into my office, scream at me, genocide Josh, baby killer, throw red paint at me, and it's become such a regular occurrence, I don't even think about it anymore. I have pictures outside my office in Washington, which you've been to. I not only have an Israeli flag, but I have pictures of every hostage, right? They're desecrated all the time. And it's just become regular. I don't even think about it anymore. We just replace the pictures, right? In the beginning, it ate at me, and now it's just kind of regular. This is the problem. We are now, the world we are in today, unfortunately, even you talk about things that happen so quickly, anti-Semitism has always been there. We know that. I mean, anyone who claims it wasn't there, I think, was quixotic. The acceleration of anti-Semitism, blatant, naked anti-Semitism in this country in the last year and a half has been something that I never thought I could see or wouldn't understand. And so that is the world we're living in, and we have to accept that that's the world we're living in now. The good news is now we know. And as I like to say, you see the field, you know what's there. Our responsibility now is, what are we all going to do about it? And when this phase of this conflict ends, God willing, are we going to go back to our lives as if we forget about that? Or are we going to still do something about it? Our enemies have spent decades preparing for this rage of anti-Semitism on college campuses, in our curricula, right, in K-12, in our communities. This was not an overnight thing from them. If we back off for a second, this will get worse and worse. Now in Congress, what am I doing? I've got something called the HEAL Act, which is all about Holocaust education, because Holocaust education in most of our schools, including in New Jersey, is now a joke. It's not even focused on, it's a check the box thing. There's no real focus in most of our schools, most of our public schools. Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which is a bill that I'm leading with Mike Lawler in the Congress, is about the definition, the IRA definition, codifying it, of what anti-Semitism is. We passed it out of the House last Congress. In the Senate, they didn't bring it to the floor. Chuck Schumer refused. So the question now is, with the Senate, with the Republicans controlling the Senate, I believe this will pass out of both houses and become law, which I think is very important. New Jersey has been sitting on the bill where 30 states have passed a definition of anti-Semitism, the IRA definition, in 30 plus states in our country. New Jersey has refused. 600,000 Jews in the state of New Jersey. Our legislature has refused to pass it. And they clearly don't feel any pressure to do anything about it, right? We have to be the ones who speak up, stand out, because listen, no one else is going to get our backs if we don't do the work, right? That's just the truth of it. So there's lots of important causes. I support a lot of them. We got to make sure we fight anti-Semitism. That's just a few of the bills. Listen, then there's all the U.S.-Israel legislation. There's bills say that if you scream "River to the Sea," that is an anti-Semitic chant, which in Teaneck High School, in the public school, they left the public high school in the middle of the day, again on the anniversary of the 7th, screaming "River to the Sea," right? A protest in the middle of the day. The kids walked out of the school. Right? So what I'm saying to you is we can do this, but we as a community need to focus on fighting hate and discrimination and anti-Semitism.
So Congressman, what about what I consider to be the source of a lot of this anti-Semitism, which is on the college campus? So some of the very worst in the nation is in our vicinity, not necessarily in your district, but our vicinity. So Columbia University, which is a few-minute drive from here, probably the worst university right now for breeding Jew hatred, or the best at breeding Jew hatred, the worst if you're a Jew. Rutgers got a horrible score by the ADL. Princeton has had issues. What are we doing to combat this on the campus and stop miseducation of students? I don't have a problem on campuses when kids learn different opinions. I don't care if on a campus, I always use this example, one kid thinks that life begins at conception, and the other one thinks life begins when a child comes out of its birth canal. But we can't argue facts anymore, and the irony is we're sending kids to college where they're denying actual facts. What are we doing to address that?
Also another small question. Thank you, Rabbi. Listen, Rutgers was just the Department of Education, Civil Rights Division, just came out and found that Rutgers had indeed had many violations. There were 400 complaints of anti-Semitism over the last year and a half. Rutgers came out, many of us worked on this complaint to the Department of Education, and said that Rutgers had not protected students' rights and the religious freedom on the campus. No surprise, because Rutgers is one of the worst places in the country when it comes to anti-Semitism, despite having one of the largest Jewish populations in the country. Yep. That's our public university. By the way, your tax dollars help support. It's one of the worst in the country when it comes to anti-Semitism. And I'm with you. You want to go time, place over there and protest? Okay. Don't interfere with other students' education, intimidate them, their ability to take an exam or live in a dorm room or go to a class. That's what this should be about. And that is my view overall at all these universities. Columbia is pathetic. And I'm being really kind because I'm in a shul about what I really think about Columbia. I've been there multiple times. Me with Richie Torres and Mike Lawler and others have sat with Jewish students at Hillel and other places. And this year was worse than last year in the sense that they looked at me and my colleagues and said, it's different this year. They're not screaming and protesting on the campus in the quad. They've just engaged in silent anti-Semitism. And I said, well, what is that? They drop us from clubs and lists of activities They don't invite us back to the school newspaper or to participate in the choir or whatever other activity we're involved in. We just get dropped off the list. So they just pretend we don't exist. Right? Think about that. They're invisible. And so that's how they excommunicate the Jews. And that's going on college campus after college campus. Now, a lot of colleges have been amazing, and I want to give credit to that. But how do you deal with this? The government, the Department of Education, our states have to aggressively go after anti-Semites. And people want that. They don't want hate, by the way, against anybody. Islamophobia against anybody. It's unacceptable. But it's accepted here in New Jersey. Did you know right before Christmas, holiday, I should say Hanukkah too, because Hanukkah fell at the same time. Right before the holiday, Rutgers, the faculty at Rutgers, passed a resolution, a BDS resolution, no boycott resolution of no money from Rutgers should invest in anything to do with Israel. And they declared that Rutgers should cut off all academic relationships with all Israeli institutions. Right? That happened at Rutgers. Who said, I put out a statement, of course. I was forcefully out there about this. No one else. Zero. Nothing.
Not even our governor.
Not our governor. Nobody. And what happens? Do people know about it? No, because the press didn't cover it. Why do they cover it? It's just another thing. It's just another. How many of these things? Reporters say to me, how many of these things can I cover? And I also get, are you going to talk? So you're going to speak out about every one of these things? Isn't it like enough already, Josh? So I said, now that you said that, you're right. I should speak out twice as loudly. You're right. I'm not loud enough. I speak about every one of these things, and people roll their eyes at me. My colleagues are like, okay, enough already. Enough already. We should just accept the anti-Semitism and let it go on. That's where we are.
You know, it feels, I know exactly how you feel, because what it feels like is that you're standing at one of those amusement parks and you're playing whack-a-mole. And the more forcefully you get in front of the whack-a-mole and you hit them down, the more they pop up and the more exhausting it gets. And then, worse is that you realize when you look to your right and your left, like you just intimated, you're by yourself. You're playing whack-a-mole by yourself. If someone else grabbed one of the hammers, it gets a little easier. And
here's the good news, though, okay? If I can, Rabbi, here's the good news on the whack-a-mole. The good news is now, politically, we've seen consequence for people who, there's more consequence now than before because people have been willing to aggressively go after those who, I'd say, have antiquated views and anti-Semitic views. And as a result, I think that ultimately, and some people would say, well, it's a shame that you have to scare people to do the right thing, right? Or shame them to do the right thing. Okay. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to do that. We have to call people out for their behavior, not just allow it to go on. And that's happening, by the way, and effectively. Members of Congress who have been on the wrong side of history are no longer in Congress. That's a good thing. And I think we should do more of that.
I agree. And I want to tell you all something. I hear too often, I actually think this is a bad thing in general, when people say I'm a one-issue voter. I don't think anyone should be a one-issue voter. They should be a multiple-issue voter, and they should put those on the scales when choosing their candidate. Whether you're a multiple-issue voter or a one-issue voter, if you want to do something inspirational, just Google how many pieces of legislation this man has introduced in Congress to combat anti-Semitism on the college campus in America and to support the U.S.-Israel relationship. He's done so as an unwavering and proud Democrat, and you should all be insanely proud, as I am, that this is who we have representing us in Congress, someone who is fierce and unwavering in their views and supportive of who he is as a Jew and our right to be Jewish. I want to say, ask one last thing. I'm going to read a sentence that I wrote. There is a vicious divide and animus amongst our brethren. Now, I phrased the sentence expressly that way because it could be implying in America, it could be applying in Israel, it could be implying in the Jewish community. We have a lot of animus and divide. You are part of a niche and a growing niche that has been really your cornerstone since I met you. You were one of the few Democrats during the Obama administration that spoke out forcefully against the Iran deal. And it kind of put you in a corner, but you didn't move on it. And you were about being an umpire, calling balls and strikes as you saw them, and not about party loyalty, but about doing the right thing and always letting your moral compass guide you. There is a growing niche of people who you get to rub shoulders with in that way, the likes, I think, of John Fetterman and Richie Torres, Lawler, and a few others. Can you talk to us about that future, about what that's going to look like and what become a hyper-partisan world? And I'm not just talking about politically. I'm talking about in the Jewish world, in the Israel world. We see decisions being made, the government's going to fall, and all of these other pieces. What have you found as the secret ingredients to keeping unity?
Well, and I say this on the eve of an inauguration, which, is going to be a divisive, probably lead to, in some ways, more division. I'm hoping that we can find ways to work together, but I'm also realistic that could be a bumpy few months. But I'm going to the inauguration on Monday. Why? Not because I'm a big supporter of the incoming president, but because I believe it's about the country and the office and who we are as Americans. And I got a group of us together before the election and said, regardless of the outcome, Democrats and Republicans, I said, let's commit to going to the inauguration regardless of who wins, because we have to put the country ahead of party. And I fundamentally believe the only way we put this back together is by doing that. And that's been guiding me in Congress, and my approach overall is country first, then party. Right? We live in the greatest country in the world. The people who want to divide us, they love that we attack each other. And by the way, they're very involved in helping. The TikTok stuff, if you understand what's going on in the TikTok stuff, you have to understand that the disinformation that's on that channel is so significant and severe that they wake up every day trying to figure out how to get us to go against each other, divide us up more. Xi does not believe, and the Chinese leadership government does not believe our best days are ahead of us, they believe our best days are behind us. They don't believe democracy can work anymore, right? So the Russians, the Iranians, and others do everything they can, and the North Koreans, to figure out ways to drive wedges in our country using social media and other means so that we think we're all opposed. The truth is, we actually agree on 95% of things, but they find these issues, these wedge issues, to divide us up because they want it so that nothing can happen in this country, right? That we can't govern, that we can't work together. I believe we've got to figure out a way to work together. Every major thing that happens in the government, because we have to pass budgets, we have to do things all the time, understand that they happen in a bipartisan way with a group of us behind closed doors who figure out how to make it happen. The Israel money, the Ukraine money, the budgets that we've just passed, the infrastructure bills, the CHIPS Act, all these things are bipartisan. They get together by us working together. The press does not like to cover that. They like to cover the fighting. It's just more fun. People like to read about how people fight with each other, not how they work together. That's the problem. Right? It's not celebrated, the working together. But it happens all the time. You should know that. And there are many of us who understand we got to put the country first. When I walk out on the Intelligence Committee, as the rabbi mentioned, when I walk out of the Intelligence Committee, and I'll spend 8 to 10 hours below ground a week reading about people who want to destroy us and destroy our freedom and our democracy. The things we stop and prevent are unbelievable. We have unbelievable people, obviously, in Israel, like our IDF soldier here, like Ben. But we have people at home who protect us, our most amazing intelligence community, law enforcement, and of course, our men and women who protect us around the world. And people want to come here because we're the greatest country in the world. They don't want to go to North Korea. They don't want to go to Iran. They want to come here because of our democracy and our freedom and our way of life. That's what keeps me optimistic. That's why we should all be optimistic. That's why we have to work together and do everything we can to stop hatred and forces that want to break us apart and spread hate. That's our job. Thanks and God bless.
I just want to offer a closing word. Right now, I'm rooting for the Detroit Lions. I grew up in Detroit, and we want the Lions to do well. Happens to be the bar mitzvah families from Detroit. And when you have a team that you're rooting for to do something great, you're really excited when they have a great captain like Campbell making it happen. And when we have a really awesome and intimidating task in front of us, we take a look and we want the best of the best leading our troops, our people. When we look at you, we feel a sense of comfort and possibility knowing that can happen. You're an amazing Congressman, you're an amazing human being, an amazing leader, and we are all so blessed and lucky to have you as our leader and our friend. Ooh, sorry.
My honor. Thank you.